Ukraine has managed to attack Russia's most important stronghold in Crimea. Moscow is on red alert.
The sound of an explosion near Crimea aroused curiosity throughout the region. Shortly afterwards, the truth emerged. Smoke rising from Russia's oil center revealed Ukraine's historic operation. With the exposure of the secret operation, Moscow went on high alert. Russian media's misleading content began to be heavily criticized by Russian bloggers. However, critical news soon arrived that would deliver a second shock. Abrams tanks entered Pokrovsk. With the sudden operation by Ukrainian special forces and the entry of Ukrainian tanks into Pokrovsk, a surprising breakthrough began on the Eastern Front. It was reported that explosions were heard in Crimea in the early hours of the morning, and reports began to come in one after another. Shortly afterwards, it was determined that the explosions had occurred in the Krasnodar Krai region, very close to Crimea. At first, it was thought to be a simple drone attack, but it soon became clear that the smoke was rising from the Russian army's logistical stronghold, the port of Temryuk. It has been determined that Ukrainian forces, using unmanned aerial vehicles, carried out an attack on a facility used by the Russian army for oil supply. The reason for the intensification of the flames following the attack is clear. The port can be described as a center used for the supply of Russian oil. The aim of the attack is obvious: to disrupt Russian supply and logistics. The desired outcome was achieved as the fire spread across a large area of 2,000 square meters. With the ignition of oil and fuel, it became impossible to control the fire. The Russian Ministry of Defense announced that 141 Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicles were destroyed overnight, noting that the intensity of attacks in the Crimea and Bryansk regions had increased significantly. The Ministry of Defense stated that it shot down 62 unmanned aerial vehicles on the Bryansk line. However, with the news coming from the Eastern Front, all eyes turned to the Eastern Front. With the sudden operation launched by Ukraine, there was an unexpected breakthrough in Pokrovsk. Abrams tanks even managed to enter Pokrovsk. The first Russian defense line fell much faster than anticipated. According to reports, the 425th Regiment of the Ukrainian forces managed to enter via a motorway west of Pokrovsk, using Abrams tanks transferred to Ukraine by Australia. The operation was planned with great precision and designed for urban warfare. This is because the tanks were modified according to Ukrainian and urban conditions before being sent to the region. With the tanks entering from the western flank, the Russian army was caught unprepared. This is because the sudden attack drew attention to the west of the region, while Ukrainian forces deployed the elite timer unit to the area. Ukraine's primary objective during this process was to halt the advance of Russian forces. The Russian army had anticipated precisely this, which is why the sudden assault caught them completely off guard. The Ukrainian Air Force deployed its airborne unit for this very reason. The unit was dropped into the area before Russian forces could consolidate their gains. At that moment, the tide of the conflict turned. Defensive lines were held, gaps were closed, and time began to work in Ukraine's favor. This move was not just a deployment, it was a turning point. Head of Defense Intelligence Kirilo Budanov clearly explained why the operation was so critical in an interview. He emphasized that the real gain was not territory, but time. We gained the time needed to bring reinforcements into the city. From that point on, no one could say the city had fallen, he stated, clearly outlining the reality on the ground. The sky remained busy throughout this process. Air reconnaissance units and FPV UAV operators marked Russian positions one by one. The subsequent precision strikes disrupted the attack formation. The advancing units halted, the pressure was broken, and the defense caught its breath. Unmanned systems were once again not on the sidelines of the war, but right at its center. As the Black Winter Group advanced on the ground forces, aviation assets, and UAV teams moved as one. This high level of coordination allowed Ukrainian intelligence assets to maintain control despite the numerical superiority of Russian forces. As we saw, the balance was quietly but decisively reversed. Strangely, some Russian media outlets also acknowledged this operation. In fact, they had to acknowledge it. This is because Ukraine's gains in Kupiansk had been denied by Russian media outlets. As a result, Russian forces actually became complacent and were misled in the region. After this process, Ukraine achieved much faster and greater gains. The main reason these operations achieved success so quickly may be the deception of Russian forces. Because despite the presence of many Russian defense lines along the operational front, the region fell very quickly. While the war was expected to stall at the point where the defense lines were located, the fact that Russian forces were deceived by a false sense of success actually accelerated the process to a large extent. During this process, Russian bloggers lashed out at the Russian media and strongly criticized their leaders. The truth has finally broken through the Russian information wall. Ukraine's progress on the ground has been revealed not by Western sources this time, but by confessions from military bloggers close to Russia. As the weeks-long narrative of "we are in control" crumbled, the situation on the Kupiansk front line revealed a very different reality. A military blogger connected to Kremlin circles admitted in a post on the 24th of December that the presence of Russian troops on the western bank of the Oskil River had largely evaporated. He stated that with Ukrainian forces reoccupying positions around Kindrashivka, Radkivka, and Mirov, the bridgehead Russia had established on this line had effectively collapsed. More strikingly, it was clearly stated that these areas were the last points remaining in Russian hands before Ukraine's counteroffensive. The blogger said that the military officials' claim to the public that 11 settlements are under control did not reflect the truth. The updated map he then published showed that Ukrainian positions were still active in a large area stretching from Dovenka to Kurilivka. This picture directly contradicted previous official statements. The criticism did not stop there. The same source accused the Russian command of fabricating false gains and prematurely withdrawing reserves around Kupiansk. It emphasized that these decisions left the area vulnerable to Ukrainian infiltrations. It recalled that similar mistakes were repeated in the Siversk direction in early 2024. He was not the only one to acknowledge that the situation was deteriorating. Another influential military blogger associated with mass donation networks in Russia reported that Russian defenses around Myrov, Radkivka, and Sobolivka were weakening by the day. He stated that Ukraine had taken control of or recaptured an area of over 180 square kilometers in the direction of Kupiansk since the 11th of December. These admissions resonated in Moscow. Another commentator close to the Kremlin accused the army of misinforming higher authorities, saying that the real picture in Kupiansk had finally come to light. A retired colonel and Russian military journalist clearly described the situation as challenging and admitted that Ukrainian troops were still able to infiltrate positions west of Oskil. Another striking detail was the silence in state media. It was noted that the Russian press, which had previously reported extensively on Kupiansk, had almost completely dropped the topic from its agenda as of December. It was stated that the Ministry of Defense now only provided brief reports containing superficial figures that did not reflect the situation on the ground. The price of false reports is being paid on the ground. The blogger, who is connected to donation networks, argued that inaccurate assessments of the situation forced commanders to make early and unplanned troop movements, which seriously weakened operational capabilities. Moreover, he claimed that creating the perception of complete control in Kupiansk led to the suspension of war payments to Russian soldiers still fighting in the region. Another blogger following the Western Forces Group stated that the problem was systemic. He said that reports were manipulated at every stage to meet high-level expectations, which paralyzed the decision-making mechanism. He pointed out that the gap between the reality on the ground and the rosy picture being painted is growing. The stalemate in Kupiansk is also putting pressure on Russia's overall war plan. Military bloggers openly admit that while Moscow continues its attacks on different fronts, it does not have sufficient manpower and equipment to break through Ukraine's northern defense lines. The defense line covering Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, Druzhkivka, and Kostiantynivka in Donetsk Oblast remains unbroken. One commentator noted that the failure to capture Kupiansk and make progress around Lyman has stalled Russian forces. He stated that multi-pronged attack plans have stalled due to a series of brigade-level failures. Another blogger emphasized that Ukraine's control around Kupiansk has prevented Russia from shifting its gains in the Lyman and Siversk line towards Sloviansk. 2026 appears to be shaping up as a pivotal year for the region. Despite the arrival of winter, the Ukrainian border remains highly volatile. In your opinion, which side will be more dominant on the battlefield in 2026? I look forward to your comments. You can follow our channel to access these news stories more easily and receive objective daily reports. You can also support us by liking our videos to ensure more content is produced. Keep following us for objective news. Wishing you all a happy day. See you in our next video.